and how someone they never expected was the reason it didn't. The backstage area was darker than Leo expected, and much quieter than the bustling hallways he had walked through earlier. He could hear the muffled sound of the audience on the other side of the curtains, hundreds of people talking at once, their voices blending into a low hum. The bright glow from the stage lights leaked through the gaps, turning the edges of the curtains into sharp outlines. Leo stood just a few steps away from the sidewall, clutching the strap of his backpack. He tried to appear calm, but his heart thumped hard against his chest. He had never been backstage at such a big event before. Everything felt huge, bigger than school, bigger than the server room, bigger than anything he was used to. Miguel stood beside him, hands folded, quietly observing. He didn't say much, but his eyes kept drifting between the stage entrance and his son. Every so often, he gave Leo a gentle pat on the back, just to remind him he wasn't alone. A few technicians worked nearby, adjusting cables, fixing microphones, and whispering instructions into headsets. They moved with quick, practiced movements, people who knew exactly what needed to be done and how little time they had to do it. One of them glanced at Leo and Miguel, but didn't question their presence. They already knew the CEO had brought them in for a reason. On stage, Evan walked up to the podium with a composed face. Though Leo could tell it was the kind of calm someone wears like a mask, the room filled with a soft hush. The audience, who had waited far longer than they expected, finally turned their attention to the CEO. "Thank you for your patience," Evan began, his voice steady through the speakers. The crowd quieted further. Some leaned forward. Others pulled out their phones, recording. A few investors in the front row sat with stiff shoulders and unreadable expressions. Evan continued. "We ran into an unexpected system challenge this afternoon. It was complicated, and I know you all had to wait longer than planned. But the good news is we solved it." A wave of whispers flowed through the audience. Backstage, Leo felt his chest tighten. He knew he wasn't supposed to feel nervous. No one out there knew who he was or what role he had played. But hearing Evan talk about the system failure made everything suddenly feel real. Too real. Evan pressed a button, and the giant screen behind him lit up with bright colors, showing the main interface of the project they had planned to reveal. The display worked perfectly, smooth transitions, clean animations, no freezing or glitching. The audience let out a quiet sigh of relief. "But before we begin the demonstration," Evan said, "I want to acknowledge something important." Leo straightened a little. Curious. In difficult moments, Evan continued, "We expect experienced professionals to find answers. Today, our engineers worked incredibly hard, faster and smarter than anyone could ask for. But sometimes solutions come from unexpected places." The technicians backstage paused what they were doing. Miguel's eyes shifted sharply toward Evan, and today, Evan went on. "Someone outside the engineering team noticed something crucial, something we had all overlooked." Leo's heart skipped. He helped us identify the problem, an outdated access key, causing a conflict hand because of that. "We're able to stand here and continue with this launch." The audience murmured again, this time softer, more curious. Evan didn't mention Leo by name, and he didn't point toward the backstage area. He didn't have to. The moment was enough. Respectful, careful, private enough not to put pressure on a kid, but sincere enough to recognize the truth. Miguel lowered his head briefly, overwhelmed. Leo stood frozen, staring at the CEO like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He felt warmth spread through his chest, not pride exactly, but something close, something softer. After a moment, Evan shifted back into presentation mode, and now, he said with a small smile, "Let's show you what our team has built." The audience clapped politely, and the lights dimmed slightly as the demonstration began. The big screen transitioned smoothly into the interactive display of the company's new platform. Evan walked across the stage, explaining features, telling stories, and showing small, real-world examples of how the technology would help clients, businesses, and everyday users. Backstage, Leo watched every part, fascinated. Even after everything that had happened, his curiosity remained the strongest thing inside him. He kept whispering things like, "That's smart," or "I didn't know it could do that," and Miguel just smiled, listening quietly to his son's excitement. But halfway through the demo, something changed. A technician hurried backstage with a worried expression. He was wearing a headset and carrying a clipboard with highlighted notes. His steps were rushed, and he looked back at the stage several times as if checking whether anyone noticed his tension. Leo watched him approach to other crew members near the soundboard. Something's off in the system. Feed, the technician whispered. The external link isn't syncing right. Leo's stomach tightened. Problems again? One of the other technicians frowned. You mean the cloud sync? Yeah. I'm not sure if it's the network load or the stream key, but it's lagging behind. If it drops, the remote viewers will lose the feed. Leo stayed quiet, listening. Miguel noticed his expression and whispered, Don't worry, they've got it. But Leo kept watching the technicians. They were pulling up screens on their tablets, tapping quickly, switching settings. Their brows wrinkled in frustration. One of them shook his head. Even Evans seemed to sense something. On stage, he glanced once toward the side. The way people do when they pick up on tension they're not supposed to hear. Leo shifted on his feet, uncertain. Should he say something? Or stay back? Before he could decide, one of the technicians muttered, Come on, why isn't the link stabilizing? Another pointed at a screen. The data refresh is delayed by half a second. If it gets worse, the stream will buffer. Leo bit his lip. He knew he shouldn't interrupt. He was just a kid who had been lucky enough to notice the earlier error. Maybe this wasn't something he should touch. But the technician's next words made him inhale sharply. The conflict earlier might have triggered a sync stutter, she said. Even if the main system is fine now, the remote server could still be adjusting. Leo finally spoke up. Though his voice was small, maybe it's a leftover process. The technicians turned around in surprise. Miguel immediately put a gentle hand on Leo's back. Son. But the lead technician knelt slightly, looking at Leo curiously. What did you say? Leo swallowed. Sometimes when you fix a key issue, a background process keeps running. It tries to keep using the old path. If you cancel it manually, the new sync works better. The technician blinked, then his eyes widened. That actually makes sense. Another technician quickly pulled up a hidden operations panel and checked the running processes. There it is, she whispered. A ghost process. It's still trying to access the old backup path. The lead technician sighed in disbelief. No wonder the link is struggling. Miguel looked stunned. You saw that? Leo shrugged awkwardly. I didn't see it. I just thought it might be there. The first technician typed rapidly, fingers moving so fast they almost blurred. If I end the process now, the system will go silent for a few seconds, and the stream, the other technician asked. It'll dip maybe, but only for a blink. Do it, the second one said. The command executed. The backstage screens froze for a moment. Leo held his breath, then smooth again. The technician exhaled. Stream stable, another added. Delay is gone. Perfect sync, Leo finally breathed out. Miguel whispered, You okay? Yeah, Leo replied softly, though he wasn't sure if his legs still felt steady. On stage, Evan continued the presentation, unaware of the backstage mini-crisis. The audience watched the display with interest, laughing occasionally at the light jokes and gasping softly during the more impressive features. The final part of the demonstration involved a real-time test, showing how quickly the system could process inputs from multiple locations. The big screen split into several panels, each showing an external device sending information into the main platform. The moment the test began, the screen processed everything instantly, without a single hitch. The audience murmured in surprise. Wow, someone in the front row whispered. That's smooth. Another said. Evan lifted his chin proudly. This is the power of streamlined access flow. No blocks. No lag. Pure, uninterrupted performance. Backstage, the technicians exchanged relieved smiles. One of them glanced at Leo and mouthed, Nice catch. Leo smiled back weakly, still feeling overwhelmed but happy he had helped again if it was a small thing this time. When the presentation ended, The audience burst into applause, not the polite clapping from earlier, but real appreciation. Some people even stood. Cameras flashed. Investors nodded at each other with approving expressions. Evan bowed slightly, then stepped off the stage and headed straight toward the backstage area. As soon as he reached them, he spotted Leo and Miguel. Without hesitation, he approached them with a tired but grateful smile. "You two stayed?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Miguel nodded. "We wanted to see the ending." And he helped again. One technician called out. Evan raised an eyebrow. Again, they explained the sync issue and how Leo had guessed the cause. Evan listened, stunned, then turned to Leo. The morning began with a strange mix of excitement and nervous energy drifting through the entire building. Everyone could feel it. The halls of Vanguard Tech were usually calm, almost too quiet at times, but today felt different. People moved faster, whispered more, and kept checking the time as if the world depended on it. In a way, it did. At least for the company. The CEO, Evan Rourke, walked into the main lobby with a smile that didn't quite match the tightness in his jaw. He had practiced the smile in the mirror, hoping it would look natural. Today was supposed to be the biggest day of his career. Years of hard work, late nights, and endless decisions had all led to this moment. Vanguard Tech was finally ready to reveal its new AI logistics system to investors, journalists, and industry leaders. If everything went well, the company would move from promising to unstoppable. Evan tried to push away the fear that always crept up during big events. He told himself that everything was under control. The team had tested the system, tested it again, and then tested it a few more times just to be safe. The servers were stable, the software was polished, and every detail of the demonstration had been rehearsed. Still, he felt that familiar, knot in his stomach, the one that reminded him how quickly things could fall apart. He stepped into the auditorium where the presentation would happen. Rows of seats faced a massive screen glowing with the company's logo. Lights were being adjusted, microphones tested, and last-minute cables taped down. Assistants moved around, carrying tablets and clipboards. The whole space felt alive, like a quiet storm preparing to break. "Good morning, everyone," Evan said as he entered. Several employees greeted him, some confidently, others nervously. They all knew how important today was. Their jobs, promotions, maybe even the company's future rested on how smoothly the launch went. In the corner of the room, the engineering team huddled around a laptop. One of them looked up and gave Evan a thumbs up. That helped ease his nerves for a moment. He nodded back, pretending everything was perfectly fine. Outside the auditorium, more guests gathered in the lobby. Investors in expensive suits chatted softly, while reporters tested their cameras and microphones. A group of students from a local business program waited near the entrance, buzzing with excitement. The place felt like a beehive. Evan stepped backstage to go over his lines one more time. He didn't like memorizing speeches. It always made him sound stiff, but today he didn't want to take risks. He read through the introduction, the demonstration steps, and the closing message. Everything flowed smoothly on paper. He just hoped it would flow the same way on stage. 5 minutes. An assistant called out. Evan's heart rate jumped. He closed his tablet and tried to steady his breathing. He glanced at himself in a nearby mirror. The suit looked good, his hair was in place, and he had practiced his confident expression enough times. But his eyes still looked tired. They always did on big days. The assistant signaled him to follow. As he walked toward the stage entrance, he could hear the audience settling into their seats. The soft chatter, the shuffling of papers, the clicking of laptops, it all somehow made him even more nervous. He reminded himself that this was normal. Big crowds always had that effect. The stage lights warmed his face even before he stepped onto the platform. A wave of heat rolled over him, not just from the lights, but from the pressure of everyone's expectations. He waited for his cue, listening to the host introduce him. The host's cheerful tone blended with the rising applause from the crowd. Evan stepped out, forcing a natural smile, and greeted the audience. Cameras pointed at him from every direction. A few flashes went off, though most people recorded with phones and digital cameras. He tried not to think about how quickly anything he said could be posted online. "Thank you all for being here," he began. His voice sounded steady, which surprised him. "Today is an important moment for us at Vanguard Tech." The screen behind him lit up with animations of supply routes, warehouses, and glowing connection lines. The visuals were meant to look impressive, and judging by the murmurs in the audience, they did. He talked about inefficiencies in shipping, delays in logistics, and the challenges companies faced. Then he shifted to the solution Vanguard Tech's new AI system. He explained how it predicted shortages, optimized routes, and reduced costs. The audience seemed engaged, nodding, typing notes, recording videos. Everything was going according to plan. Then came the moment that mattered most, the live demonstration. Evan turned toward the panel of devices set up beside him. He tapped the control screen to activate the software. The system started loading. The screen pulsed with the company's signature blue glow. A loading bar appeared. Then something strange happened. The bar froze. Only a few seconds passed. But Evan felt like he was standing there for minutes. He tapped the button again. Nothing changed. A confused ripple spread through the audience as they watched the giant screen. Evan tried to stay calm. Maybe it was a delay. Maybe the network was slow. Maybe the screen suddenly went dark, then flashed red with an error code. A loud murmur rolled through the auditorium. People leaned forward in their seats. Reporters sat up straight with their cameras ready. Investors exchanged glances. Evan's throat went dry. He tapped the screen again, hoping it would magically fix itself. Instead, more error lines appeared, scrolling faster than he could read behind him. The giant screen now displayed a message no presenter ever wanted to see during a live demonstration. System failure, reboot required. Evan felt his face heat up. His hands turned cold. He tried to keep smiling, but his lips twitched as he forced them into place. His mind raced for something to say, something that wouldn't make the situation worse. A few people in the audience laughed nervously. Others whispered to each other. One investor stood up and walked toward the exit. Phone already pressed to his ear. Evan's heart pounded, so hard he could feel it in his fingertips. He tried to explain that there might be a minor technical issue, but his voice sounded thin and strained. The audience listened politely, but everyone could sense the tension. He pressed the restart button. The system froze. Again, another wave of whispers spread through the room. A journalist in the second row raised her camera, zoomed in on the error message, and started recording. Evan felt dizzy. His worst fear was unfolding right in front of him. Years of work, millions of dollars, and the company's reputation were unraveling on stage. He cleared his throat and tried to keep his composure. "Let me check with our technical team," he said. Forcing a smile that didn't fool anyone, he stepped off the stage as calmly as he could. Though inside he felt like running. The moment he disappeared behind the curtain, the smile vanished. He turned to the nearest engineer with a look that mixed frustration, fear, and confusion. "What is happening?" he asked, trying not to raise his voice in front of everyone. The engineer, wide-eyed, said they had no idea yet. They had tested everything last night. Nothing like this should be happening. Evan rubbed his forehead. The pressure of the moment made everything feel heavier. The heat from the lights, the eyes of the audience, the uncertainty of what would happen next, to all press down on him at once. He followed the engineers to the server room, hoping for answers. The sound of fans and machines filled the space. Dozens of cables glowed with tiny lights. It should have looked reassuring, but instead it made him even more anxious. The engineers rushed to their stations, typing rapidly. Screens displayed lines of code, logs, and error reports. They whispered to each other, shaking their heads, pointing at unexpected data. The tension in the room was thick enough to feel in the air. Evan watched the screens, trying to make sense of the mess. He wasn't a beginner. He understood enough about the system to know when something was seriously wrong. And this looked very wrong. One engineer said the failure didn't make sense. Another said the system wasn't responding at all. A third said they might need to shut down everything and start from scratch. That last comment nearly made Evan's legs give out. He gripped the edge of a table to steady himself, his mind filled with thoughts of investors pulling out, articles mocking the failed launch, and employees fearing for their jobs. Everything he had built felt like it was slipping away. He took a slow breath, trying to calm himself. But panic kept rising. This was not how the day was supposed to go. This was not how anything was supposed to go. And somewhere in the hallway outside the room, unnoticed by everyone inside, a janitor's son stood quietly, watching all the chaos with a curious look in his eyes. He didn't say a word, not yet, but something about the flashing error on the monitor looked familiar to him. The storm inside Vanguard Tech was only beginning. The hallway outside the server room was filled with quiet tension. People walked quickly but tried not to look like they were panicking. Assistants held clipboards close to their chests, whispering into headsets as if each word carried weight. A few interns stood near the wall, unsure whether they should be helping or staying out of the way. No one wanted to make things worse. Through all this movement, a janitor wheeled a cleaning cart slowly down the hall. His name was Miguel, and he had been working at Vanguard Tech for years. He didn't talk much, but people liked him because he was calm, patient, and always ready to help. Today, though, even he could sense something was wrong. The building felt too hot, too tense, too heavy. Like everyone was holding their breath at the same time, his son Leo walked a few steps behind him. He had come along after school because Miguel didn't have time to drop him at home. Leo didn't mind. He actually loved visiting the building. He loved watching the engineers, the blinking servers, the people typing on screens with complicated graphs. He didn't understand everything, but he liked the feeling of being around smart people doing big things. Today, though, the atmosphere felt different. He watched the employees moving fast, their voices sharper, their steps louder. Something was happening, something big. And even though he didn't know what it was, he could feel the stress in the air. Inside the server room, Evan stood with the engineers, his face tight with frustration. A dozen screens showed error logs, warnings, and frozen processes. The main server tray flickered with lights that didn't match their usual rhythm. It looked like a heartbeat skipping beats. One engineer rubbed his forehead and sighed. "We've never seen this error before." "It's not something we tested for," another typed rapidly, scrolling through more logs. "It's rejecting commands from the main system. It thinks the instructions are coming from two different sources." "That makes no sense," someone else muttered. "There's only one source." Fen listened to all of this and felt the pressure multiplying. He didn't want to blame anyone, not yet, but he desperately needed answers. Investors were still waiting in the auditorium. Reporters were probably filming the empty stage. People online would already be talking about the failed demo. He could almost imagine the headlines forming. His stomach turned. "Can anyone fix this?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "We're trying," an engineer replied. "But right now we don't even know the cause." It wasn't the answer Evan wanted to hear. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. He glanced toward the door, thinking maybe he should go and give the audience an update. But he didn't have anything reassuring to tell them. Outside, Leo peeked through the doorframe. He was curious, but he knew better than to walk inside without permission. He just wanted to see what all the commotion was about. From where he stood, he could clearly see the red error message flashing on one of the screens. He had seen that pattern before. His eyes narrowed. He didn't know every line of coding or every technical detail behind a system like this, but he had spent months teaching himself simple programming online. Free courses, videos, forums, he soaked up whatever he could find. And a few weeks ago, while practicing, he saw an error that looked a lot like the one on the screen inside. It had to do with conflicting credentials to keys trying to control the same system. That small memory stuck in his mind now. He wasn't sure it was the same thing, but something about it made him pause. Meanwhile, inside the server room, the engineers continued working. One of them sighed loudly. "The system won't even reboot cleanly. It keeps looping back to the same shutdown failure. I don't get it." "We checked every line of the deployment code," another added. "Nothing was wrong last night." "I don't care about last night," Evan said. He tried to sound calm, but it came out sharper than he intended. "I care about right now." His voice softened a little when he added, "Please. We have to figure this out. Engineers nodded, understanding the weight on his shoulders. They weren't trying to fail. They wanted the launch to succeed too. But every second that passed made the problem feel larger. Back in the hallway, Miguel gently tapped his card against the wall to get his son's attention. "Stay close, okay?" he said quietly. He didn't like the way Leo was leaning near the door. The last thing he wanted was to disrupt something important. "I am," Leo whispered, still watching the flashing error. Miguel sighed. He knew that look. His son wasn't just curious. He was studying the problem, thinking about it. Whenever something involved computers, screens, or coding, Leo's brain switched into a different mode. He absorbed things differently. Miguel didn't always understand it, but he admired it. He touched his son's shoulder. "Come on, let him work." But Leo's eyes stayed on the screen. The error code kept repeating, almost like it was calling out for attention. Inside, the voices grew louder. It could be a corrupted file, That wouldn't cause a dual source command. Then what is it? I don't know. One engineer slammed his hand on the desk out of pure frustration. It wasn't loud enough to scare anyone. But it showed how desperate the situation had become. Evan watched all of it, feeling more helpless by the minute. He checked his watch. They were far past the scheduled demo time. People outside were probably losing patience. Some investors might even be thinking about pulling out. He had to make a decision soon, whether to cancel the event, postpone it, or try to stall the audience longer. He didn't want to choose any of those options. His phone buzzed. A message from an investor? Updates? He didn't reply. What would he even say? Across the room, another engineer called out, "I think I found something." Everyone rushed to his desk. Evan leaned closer, hoping this was finally the breakthrough. But after a moment of scrolling, the engineer's confidence faded. "No. Sorry. False lead." Evan closed his eyes and took a slow breath through his nose. His chest felt tight. He wasn't angry at them, he was angry at the situation, but stress made every small problem feel bigger than it really was. In the hallway, Leo stood quietly, thinking harder now. He didn't want to interrupt professionals or cause trouble. But the longer he watched, the more certain he became that he recognized the error. He whispered to himself, "It's the same conflict key. It has to be." Miguel didn't hear the words, but he saw his son's serious expression and frowned. "Leo, don't bring this into your head. This is their job. Let them handle it." "I know," Leo replied softly. "I'm just thinking." Miguel sighed again. He didn't want to discourage his son. He loved how curious and eager he was. But this was a major company event, with something he didn't fully understand. Getting involved could cause a problem. Inside, Evan's patience thinned. He straightened up and said firmly, "We need every possible idea. I don't care how small it is. If anyone sees anything unusual, speak up." The engineers nodded, but their expressions showed exhaustion. They had been staring at screens for so long that everything started blurring together. Leo heard Evan's voice and swallowed hard. His heart beat quickly. Part of him wanted to walk in and say what he thought. Another part reminded him he was just a kid standing in a hallway with a backpack and worn-out sneakers. He looked up at his dad, hesitating. "I think I know what's happening." Miguel blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I saw that error once," Leo whispered. Not exactly the same, but close. It was an access key conflict. Two keys, fighting to give orders. Miguel stared at him. "Leo, you don't know the whole system. This is advanced programming, not the stuff you practice on your laptop." "I know," Leo said. "But the pattern looks the same." Miguel didn't respond at first. He looked toward the server room door, then back at his son. He knew Leo was smart, really smart, but this wasn't a game or a class assignment. This involved a company seen with executives and investors and millions of dollars. He opened his mouth to say something. But at that moment, Evan suddenly stepped out of the room. He didn't see the janitor and his son at first. He just needed air. His breathing was shallow, and his suit felt too tight around his shoulders. He leaned a hand on the wall, trying to steady himself. For a brief moment, he closed his eyes and tried to push down the panic rising in his chest. That's when he heard a quiet voice say, almost accidentally. It might be a conflict key. Evan lifted his head. He saw the janitor next to him. A thin boy with a backpack who suddenly looked like he regretted speaking. Evan didn't know what he expected, a technician. Another engineer? Maybe a consultant arriving late? He definitely didn't expect a kid. Still, something in the boy's voice didn't sound uncertain. It sounded like someone remembering a real experience. Evan took a breath. What did you say? Leo looked at his father, who gave him a worried but encouraging nod. Then he looked at the CEO and said quietly, "The error on the screen. It looks like a key conflict. Like the system is getting commands from two different access points." The hallway fell silent for a moment. Even Miguel froze, unsure whether he had just made a mistake letting his son speak. Evan blinked. "And how do you know that?" Leo hesitated. "I saw it when I was practicing coding. The system didn't crash like yours, but the error pattern looked really close." Inside the server room, an engineer overheard the conversation and said, "Wait." What did he say? Another stepped out and looked at the kid with curiosity. Evan didn't have time to judge backgrounds, ages, or titles. At this point, he needed every possible lead, even the smallest one. He crouched down slightly to look Leo in the eyes. "Can you tell me exactly what you remember?" Leo nodded slowly. "If the system thinks two keys are giving orders, it tries to follow both. But if one of them is outdated or copied wrong, it gets confused. Then it freezes or restarts over and over." Several engineers in the doorway exchanged surprised looks. "That actually makes sense," one of them said quietly. Another added, "We checked the primary key last night, but we didn't check the backup." Evan felt something he hadn't felt since the crisis started. He looked at Leo again, this time with genuine appreciation. "Come inside and tell us what you saw." Miguel's eyes widened. "Sir, he's just a kid, that's fine," Evan said. "Right now, we need ideas, and he has one." Leo looked up at his dad. Miguel hesitated, then nodded. Leo took a small breath, stepped forward, and walked into the room filled with blinking lights, scrolling screens, and worried adults. No one knew it yet. But the quiet boy in worn-out sneakers was about to change everything. Leo stepped into the server room slowly, almost shyly, as if he wasn't sure he should be there. The bright screens lit up his face, and the low hum of the machines surrounded him like a pulse. The engineers watched him with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Some crossed their arms, others leaned closer, trying to understand what this kid could possibly offer that they hadn't already tried. Miguel stood near the doorway, unsure if he should step inside or stay back. His hands rested on the handle of his cleaning cart, but his mind was completely fixed on his son. He had always known Leo was bright, but this situation felt huge, far bigger than anything a boy his age should have to carry. Evan stood beside Leo, guiding him toward the main workstation. There was a tension in Evan's voice, the kind that came from stress mixed with a tiny spark of hope. "Show them the error you were talking about," he said gently. One engineer brought up the failing screen. The same one with the flashing red code that had caused so much panic. The error repeated in a loop, almost taunting them. Leo stared at it for a few seconds longer than anyone expected. He didn't blink much. He simply watched the pattern, the timing, the strange rhythm of the failure. It wasn't the exact same thing he had seen at home, but it was close enough for him to recognize the structure. He pointed at the upper part of the screen. "That part? Right there. That line shows a split command path. It means the system doesn't know which key it should trust." One of the engineers stepped forward, squinting at the same section. "We assumed it was a corruption issue." "It's not," Leo said softly. "It's just confused. It's like when you open the same program twice on a slow computer and both start fighting to control the screen." A few people blinked at the simple explanation. It was an example they all understood. Another engineer scratched his chin. "But this system shouldn't accept a duplicate key. It was designed to block that. Unless the duplicate wasn't registered as new," Leo replied. "If it was copied from an older version, then the system might think it's the same one, even though it isn't." The room went silent. That simple thought, so obvious in hindsight, hadn't occurred to anyone. The chief engineer leaned over the workstation. "Wait, are you saying the backup key might be outdated?" Leo nodded. outdated or copied wrong. Either one would confuse the main system. The chief engineer let out a slow exhale. If that's true, then the secondary access server could be sending mismatched instructions. And the main system doesn't know who to listen to, Leo added. The room changed instantly. Engineers who had been tired now stood straighter. The ones who had been sitting shot up from their chairs. Fingers flew across keyboards as they began checking the backup server. The logs, the most recent accesses, and the timestamp on the secondary key. Evan watched all of this with cautious hope. He still didn't know if they were close to a solution. But the energy in the room felt different, now like gears finally starting to turn. While the engineers scrambled, Leo stood quietly beside one of the desks. He didn't want to get in the way. Every few seconds he stepped back, trying not to block anyone's view. But the engineers kept pulling him closer. Show me where the conflict starts. Does this look familiar? Is this the same pattern you saw before? Leo answered every question calmly, even though his heart was racing. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. In school, teachers told him he was smart, but here, grown adults were listening to him like he had something important to say. Miguel watched with pride, mixed with disbelief. This was his Sunda. Same kid who spent long evenings tinkering with old laptops and fixing broken school devices for fun. Minutes passed. Engineers cross-checked system logs, compared unique key values, and confirmed a discovery. The backup key was outdated, not by a few hours, not even by a day. It was 3 weeks old. Someone had forgotten to update it during the last server maintenance. The system had still accepted it because the structure matched, but the internal data didn't. That mismatch had caused the entire crash. We found it, one engineer shouted. The room erupted, not with cheers, but with relieved breaths. Shoulders dropped, hands pushed hair away from foreheads. People exchanged looks that said, finally. Evan leaned forward. Can you fix it? Yes, the chief engineer replied. We need to reset the secondary server, generate a new key, and sync it with the main system. But it'll take time. How long, if everything goes perfectly? Maybe 10 minutes, another engineer added. 15 if we have to rebuild some segments. Evan exhaled. 10 to 15 minutes wasn't good, but it was doable. He could buy them 15 minutes. He turned to Leo. You helped us find the problem. Thank you. His voice cracked slightly, not from sadness, but from relief so sharp it felt like a physical hit. Leo shrugged softly. I just saw something familiar. Miguel stepped closer and put a hand on his son's shoulder. He has this habit of noticing patterns. It saved us today, Evan replied. For the first time since the crisis began, CEO felt the pressure ease off his shoulders, even if only a little. The situation wasn't fixed yet, but at least they knew what the problem was. That alone changed everything. The engineers began working at full speed. Lines of code flew across the screens. Warning messages changed to progress notifications. Someone announced the start of the full key replacement process. The server lights flickered in a steady pattern now. It's no longer chaotic. But the relief didn't last long, eh? Soft alarm beeped from one of the machines. Everyone turned toward the sound. What's that? Evan asked. An engineer checked the panel. It's the load stabilizer. The backup server is overheating. As if on cue, the machine let out a deeper buzz. The temperature gauge rose. How bad is it? Evan asked quickly. Not terrible, the engineer said. But if it overheats too much, it'll shut down. We can't replace the key if it shuts down. The room tensed again. Another engineer rushed to the cooling unit. The fan isn't running at full speed. It was fine yesterday, someone said. Yesterday, everything was fine, another muttered. Evan ran a hand over his forehead. Can we fix the fan? We're trying. But the fan motor rattled like something inside was loose. The temperature climbed another degree. Leo moved closer and whispered to his dad, they should open the vent panel. The airflow might be blocked. Miguel nodded slightly. You can tell them. Before he could speak, an engineer beat him to it. Open the vent. Maybe dust is stuck. They unscrewed the panel and pulled it open. A giant clump of dust sat behind the fan blades. Blocking half the airflow, the engineer groaned loudly. You've got to be kidding me, another muttered. This is what happens when maintenance rushes. Miguel cleared his throat quietly. I can clean it. The engineer stepped back, realizing who he was. Would you? One asked. Please, another added. Miguel smiled softly and pulled a small hand vacuum from his cart. He worked carefully, clearing away the dust while Leo held a flashlight steady. Once the fan was clean, it spun smoothly again, and the temperature began to drop. The room breathed a collective sigh, with the cooling back to normal. Engineers restarted the key sync process. Minutes ticked by slowly. Everyone watched the progress bar on the main screen inch forward. Some paced the room. Others tapped their pens nervously. Evan stood still, arms crossed tightly, refusing to take his eyes off the screen. Leo stood next to him, also watching. When the bar reached the halfway point, a tiny smile tugged at the corner of Evan's mouth. When it reached 80%, he let out a shaky breath. Finally, the bar hit 100%. A message appeared on the screen. Key update, successful system ready. The room erupted in soft cheers and relieved laughs. A few engineers clapped each other on the back. Someone whispered, "Thank goodness," while another whispered, "We're actually back." Evan closed his eyes for a second, overwhelmed by relief. Then he looked at Leo with gratitude that went far beyond words. "You helped save this launch," he said gently. Leo's cheeks flushed. "I just saw something familiar." Miguel put a hand on his shoulder again. "You did more than that." Before they could say more, an engineer ran diagnostics again. "All systems green," she announced. Evan didn't waste a second. "All right, get the demo loaded again. I'll go update the audience." As he turned to leave, he looked down at Leo. "Would you like to watch the presentation from backstage?" Leo's eyes widened. Miguel smiled, proud and emotional in a way he rarely showed. And with that, the CEO hurried toward the auditorium, ready to face an audience that had waited far too long, but would soon learn how close everything had come to falling apart. "You're full of surprises," he said warmly. Leo's cheeks reddened. "It was just an idea that saved the stream," Evan replied. "That matters." Miguel placed a hand on his son's shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. The CEO took a deep breath, clearly exhausted but deeply relieved. "Come with me," he said. "There's someone I want you both to meet." He led them toward a quieter lounge behind the stage, soft couches, warm lights, and a long table with refreshments. Inside, several board members and senior staff stood discussing the success of the demo as soon as Evan walked in with Miguel and Leo. The room fell quiet. "These two," Evan announced, "played a big part in what happened today." Several people looked at them in surprise. Some smiled. Others nodded respectfully. Leo felt out of place, but also strangely proud. One board member, an older man with silver hair and a calm expression, stepped forward. "Young man, we heard a little about what you did." "Thank you," Leo nodded shyly. Miguel squeezed his shoulder again, steadying him. Another executive asked Evan quietly, "Is he an intern? Or maybe a student from one of the tech programs?" Evan shook his head. "No, he's Miguel's son, and he's self-taught." The executives exchanged impressed looks. Miguel shifted awkwardly. "He just likes computers." "That's an understatement," Evan said with a smile. For a few minutes, the adults talked about the demo, the system, the fix, and the future of the project. Leo listened quietly, his eyes drifting around the room, taking everything in. But then something unexpected happened. The silver-haired board member stepped closer to Miguel and said in a low voice, "Your son has a gift." Miguel nodded slowly. "I know. You should encourage him. Opportunities like this don't happen for everyone." Miguel swallowed. "I try." The man smiled. "Keep doing it." Nearby, Evan crouched slightly so he could talk to Leo at eye level. "Listen," he said gently. "You're very sharp. You notice things other people miss. That's rare." Leo stared at his shoes. "I just like solving things." "And that's exactly why you'll go far," Evan replied. "Keep learning. Keep looking at problems the way you do. It'll take you somewhere bigger than you can imagine." Leo lifted his eyes, surprised by the sincerity in the CEO's voice. Miguel felt his throat tighten. He had always hoped his son's curiosity meant something. He was seeing proof from people who understood the world far better than he did. Evan added quietly, "If you ever want to visit our engineering department again, just let me know." Leo blinked. "Really? Really?" Evan said with a smile. Miguel looked at his son's wide eyes and felt a swell of emotions he couldn't put into words. The moment didn't last long. Others stepped forward too. Congratulate the CEO and discuss next steps. But for Leo and Miguel, the quiet exchange meant everything. As the crowd in the lounge grew louder, Miguel touched his son's shoulder again. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Leo nodded. "Yeah." Evan heard the answer and stepped toward them. "Before you leave, take this." He handed Leo a small badge symbol with the company logo. "That's a visitor pass," Evan explained. "But I've marked it so you can use it any time. It gets you into the tech floor." Leo held the badge like it was something fragile. "Thank you," he whispered. "You earned it," Evan replied. "And who knows, maybe one day you'll work here." Leo's face glowed in a way Miguel hadn't seen before as they walked out together, father and son. Side by side, still in awe of everything that had happened, the building no longer felt intimidating. It felt like a place where something had changed, something important, and they both knew the story wasn't over yet when the doors to the auditorium opened again and the CEO stepped out. The room filled with quiet murmurs. People leaned forward in their seats. Some had been tapping their feet, checking their phones, wondering what the long delay meant. But none of them knew how close the entire event had come to collapsing. None of them knew that a boy in a simple hoodie had just helped save the company. They were all there to support. The CEO walked to the center of the stage with a calmer expression than before. The lights shined on him, and the large screens behind him glowed bright again as the display restarted. The platform booted up smoothly, showing none of the chaos that had filled the server room. The audience had no idea the whole thing had nearly crashed for good. He gave a warm smile and lifted the microphone. "Thank you all for your patience," he said. "We had a small technical hiccup, but everything is running perfectly now," he spoke with confidence. But inside his mind flashed moment after moment from the server room the error loops, the panic in the engineers' voices, the alarm from the overheating server, the exhausted eyes of his team, and most of all, the quiet voice of a young boy pointing to a single line of code that everyone else had missed. The demo went smoothly. The system responded fast, the numbers updated in real time. The platform showcased all the features investors had traveled to see. Every slide that appeared felt like a small victory. Every click that didn't freeze made the CEO's heart grow lighter. By the time he finished, the audience burst into applause. Some stood. Cameras flashed. A few of the investors exchanged impressed looks. It appeared to be a complete success. But while the room cheered, Leo stood backstage with his dad, watching from behind a curtain. His heart beat fast, not because of fear, but because he couldn't believe he'd played even the smallest part in something this big. He didn't know much about business or investors or launches, but he did know that he'd helped fix something important. That was enough to make his hand shake slightly. Miguel, standing beside him, put a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" he asked softly. Leo nodded. "Yeah, it's just a lot. You did good," Miguel said. "More than good." When the presentation finally ended, the CEO returned backstage to a flood of employees congratulating him, updating him, telling him which interviews were waiting for him and which investors wanted to speak privately. But he waved most of them off, asking them to wait. He was looking for someone else. He found Leo and Miguel standing near a stack of equipment cases, out of the way, as if they weren't sure where they belonged. The CEO approached them with a tired but sincere smile. "There you two are," he said, walking up. "I didn't want to leave without talking to you." Miguel straightened a little. "We didn't want to get in the way." "You weren't in the way," the CEO replied. "You saved us." He turned to Leo. "Especially you." Leo lowered his head a little. "I just recognized the error." The CEO shook his head gently. "A room full of experts stared at the same thing and didn't see it. You did. That's something special." Leo didn't know how to respond. Compliments always made him unsure of what to do with his hands, where to look, how to stand. But the CEO didn't push him. He just smiled kindly. Then he turned to Miguel. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Both of you. Miguel nodded. Of course. They moved to a quieter hallway where only a few staff passed by occasionally. The noise from the auditorium faded behind them. The CEO took a breath. I want to tell you something. When the system crashed earlier, I thought that was it. Years of work. Investors ready to walk out. A whole company about to fall apart in front of me. It felt like everything was slipping through my hands. Miguel nodded carefully, listening. But then your son walked in. And he saw something none of us saw. Paused. People like him. People who notice things others overlook, they're rare. Leo's cheeks warmed a little. I just like learning stuff. That's exactly why I want to help, the CEO replied. Miguel's eyes widened slightly. Help how? The CEO turned fully toward Leo. I want to offer you a paid summer internship. You'd work with our junior developers and engineers, learn at your own pace, get guidance, and try projects. No pressure. Just learning and building. Leo froze. For a full second, he didn't even breathe. Miguel stared, shocked. Are you serious? Absolutely, the CEO replied. He earned it today. Leo's voice was barely above a whisper. But I'm just a kid. You're a kid who saw what a team of professionals didn't, the CEO said. Age doesn't decide talent. That sentence hit Leo harder than he expected. No one had ever said anything like that to him. Another moment passed before he finally found his words. I'd like that. But only if it's okay with my dad. Miguel swallowed hard. His eyes grew a little shiny, though he blinked to clear them. If it's what you want, then yes, of course. I'm proud of you. Leo smiled a small, shy, but deeply real smile. The CEO reached out his hand, and Leo shook it awkwardly but excitedly. It won't start right away, the CEO said. School comes first, always. But when your break begins, we'll have a place ready for you. Leo nodded, still trying to believe it. Before they could talk more, a group of engineers approached quickly. They looked exhausted but happy. Sir, one of them said to the CEO, we ran additional checks. Everything's stable. The servers are synced, the logs are clean, and the temperature is normal. No more errors. That's good to hear, the CEO replied. Then the engineer turned toward Leo. And thank you. Seriously, we owe you big time. Few others nodded. One even gave him a small thumbs up, which made Leo grin slightly. When the engineers left, the CEO continued walking with Leo and Miguel toward the exit. The building was still busy as staff packing up equipment, talking to media teams, and coordinating with the event organizers. But even in the middle of all that, a few employees who heard the story whispered to each other and smiled when Leo passed. Outside, the late afternoon sun was starting to set. Soft golden light reflected off the glass windows of the building. The air felt fresh, calmer than the tension-filled server room they had just escaped hours earlier. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, the CEO paused again. I don't want today to fade away as just a stressful memory, he said. I want it to remind us of something important. Miguel tilted his head. What's that? That talent can come from anywhere, he said. And sometimes, the people we overlook the most are the ones with the answers we need. Those words stayed with Miguel more deeply than the CEO probably realized. As a janitor, he had worked in silence for years, mostly unnoticed except when someone needed a spill cleaned or a hallway cleared. He never complained about it. But he always hoped his son would have opportunities he didn't today. That hope had already begun taking shape. The CEO stepped back, letting the father and son walk ahead. Get some rest, he said. You both earned it. And Leo, I'll see you this summer. Leo nodded with a grin he couldn't hide. See you. As they walked toward the bus stop, Miguel looked down at his son. You know, he said softly, when I was your age, I never had chances like this. Leo looked up. I just like coding. That's enough, Miguel said. More than enough. They sat on the bench together, watching cars pass, listening to the hum of the city. Miguel rested an arm around his son's shoulders. Are you nervous? He asked. A little, Leo admitted. But excited too. That's a good mix. A breeze moved through the street, carrying the faint sounds of people talking and traffic buzzing. The sky shifted from gold to soft orange. Leo leaned back and let the moment sink in. Hours earlier, he had been nothing more than a kid waiting for his dad to finish work. Nobody knew his name. Nobody cared what he could do. Now everything felt different. Not because he wanted fame or attention, not because he saw himself as a genius, but because, for the first time, people had taken him seriously. Seriously, they had listened. They had trusted him, and he realized something. Maybe he did have a place in the world of technology. Maybe all those long nights teaching himself, fixing old devices, and studying error patterns weren't just hobbies. Maybe they were the beginning of something real. Miguel turned to him. "I'm proud of you," he repeated. Leo smiled. "Thanks, Dad." The bus finally pulled up, doors opening with a soft hiss. They stepped inside, the warm interior lights making everything feel even more peaceful. As the bus moved down the street, Leo looked back through the window at the tall building getting smaller behind them. The place where everything had almost gone wrong. The place where he had helped make things right. He didn't know what the future would look like exactly. He didn't know where this new path would lead. But he knew one thing for sure. He was ready for it. And somewhere behind those glass walls, a CEO and a team of engineers were already telling the story of the quiet boy who walked in during a crisis and changed everything. The world hadn't seen anything yet, and Leo was just getting